What is up, guys? So, I'm still recovering a little bit from being sick. I'm finally getting over that. And I'm kind of building back up and getting into the swing of things after the year started. So, today I figured it would be a good day to kind of just sit down and come up with some of the base styles for this input for this design system that I'm kind of working on and off. So, I just really wanted to take some time and sit down and build the code for this input. Now, this doesn't have to do with validation. It's purely just styling HTML elements and CSS. But this is a good start on it, I think. And if you don't really know how to style inputs or you haven't done it before, this might be a good little video for you to watch. But I know it's going to be a little different than most of the videos, but this is actually kind of built on that previous video we did a little while back about buttons, where we actually created a couple buttons and we used part of a design system that I was working on at the time to create, the style, what happens when you hover on it, click it, what does it look like if it's disabled. So we kind of follow that, but we build all of these different styles for different possible states that the input could be in. So let's go ahead and jump on into this video, and hopefully you get something out of it. But before we do jump into it, if you like this video or you learn anything from it, give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. It really helps. So yeah, let's go ahead and jump on into this. Alright guys, so I have this document out. It's just this one HTML file that we were working on a little while ago, where we basically just made these styles for these two buttons here, just like a disabled button and a regular button, so you can see these little styles. So anyways, we're going to be using this same file today to work on a few inputs. And if I go ahead, let me pull up the design. So this is the input that we're really going to work on. We're not worrying about this dark thing. We're just going to worry about what is on the light background. So this is the input. And these are all the various different states that this input could possibly be in. So we're not going to worry about too many of these either. Basically, we just want to get this input set up. We'll do the hover effect, and then when it's focused, maybe we'll do a few of these, maybe an error state, and then perhaps a disabled style as well. So we're just going to do some of these. We're not going to do all of them, but we want to grab some HTML and we're going to style these things up so we can just get like a head start on some inputs. So let's go ahead and let's pull up that HTML document so you can see we have this right here. So let's go ahead and we'll go down past these, and I'll just put them all in a div wrapper for now. We'll give it a class of input wrapper, just like that, and then let's end the div. And instead of input wrapper, I'll just do inputs wrapper, and then we'll go from there and we'll actually add in all of those inputs. All right, so before we go ahead and we look at putting in this HTML, let's go ahead and see what the structure of our input looks like. So if we look at this right here, you'll see this is not part of it. This is just a little label for the design. But basically, this is the input here. So we have the input, and then the only other thing that we have associated with this is a label. So we're going to want to wrap these two things together and style those, and everything else is just going to be within those. The only other thing that we do have is this little item down here, this little small piece of text, and this could be done using a small tag or something like that. or even a span, but basically it's just going to be like, it could be used as descriptive text. So maybe you wanted to add a little more context to an input. You could use this, just not in red, beneath an input, and or you could use it for an error message. So let's go ahead and start adding in some HTML. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a div with the class of input wrapper. Okay, and this is where we're actually going to put our input and everything. So in here, we're going to write input. I'm going to say type equals text. This doesn't need to be anything special. Let's do placeholder. Let's just be consistent and we'll make it say placeholder. So the placeholder is placeholder. Perfect. All right. And then we can go ahead and just end that. So if we save that and come over here and load or refresh this, you'll see here's an input and here is the placeholder text. And if you go ahead and type in, that goes away. Okay, so the other thing we need is a label. So we're going to want to go ahead and add a label. Let me see. If I can type. And let's just call this input. Okay, it doesn't need to be anything more than that. We'll do input title. Let's just be consistent. Input title. Now, no, I'm not going to write all of this in all caps here because I do want to rely on CSS to actually style that text. So let's go back over to the input here the HTML page and refresh it. And so you'll see we have the label and then we have the input right there. So that should be perfectly fine. Now what we can do is actually start writing all of the CSS for this. So our inputs are going to consist of an input wrapper, and then the label, and then the actual input. So let's go ahead and we'll just start right here, right above the HTML, and start writing this. So let's grab the input wrapper and let's get cracking. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is write a display of flex. And then here, let's set the flex direction to column. And then let's justify content start or flex start and align items start. So this should put the input right beneath the label. There we go. Perfect. And let's just make sure we're importing our font somewhere. No, we're not importing our font. So I think we're using Open Sans on the XD document. Yeah, Open Sans. Let's go ahead and grab that Open Sans font. So we're just going to go to fonts.google.com and let's grab Open Sans right here. I love this font. All right, so we'll just use this standard, bring it in as a link. I'll put it right beneath the title, and then we'll set this font family right here. Font family, Open Sans, perfect. So we should see this changed a little bit. There we go, that updated, and this is fine. We'll worry about that in a moment. So let's go ahead and start styling. Let's start with our label. So let's grab input, wrapper, label, and let's see what we need to do. So the font size is going to be 11 pixels. So let's do font size 11 pixels. Let's do text transform uppercase. Take a quick look. So it's looking a little better. The font family is definitely not what we want. So let's go ahead and set this here. So now that is updated, but we are going to want semi-bold. So let's see what the semi-bold is over here. Let's customize this. Semi-bold. All right, we're gonna need that. So let's go back and we'll update this. And then semi-bold is gonna be 600. So I'm just trying to only bring in the actual fonts that we need. So let's do font weight 600. And now you can see that is updated there. Let's go ahead and see what else we need to do. We need to set that color. So this is the color. Perfect. That's looking much better. Now the other thing I'm going to do is I am going to remove the padding from it, any padding that might be there, and any margin. What I'm going to do is it's going to be 0 on the top right. However, on the bottom, that's where we're going to put our margins. Let's go grab the XD document, see how much we got. 1, 2, all right, so it's 4 pixels. That'll be pretty easy. 4 pixels and then 0 on the left. There we go. All right. Now I think that's enough for that input. Let's go ahead and let's grab our, oh, I'm sorry, the label. Let's actually grab our input now. Input, wrapper, input, and let's start styling this. So I'm going to start with the text real quick. Let's see, font size is going to be 14 pixels and it's open sans and it's regular. So we're going to do font size 14 pixels. Now you could do this using M's or Rems, but right now I'm just going to use pixels to be very precise. The font weight is going to be 400. And then let's go ahead and see. All right, that's looking good. Let's see what else. We have our color of the text, but that's not actually going to be the color of the text. That's the color of the placeholder. So the color of the text is going to be this right here. So let's grab that and put the color there. All right, so that's the actual color of the text. And if we go over to the Chrome page, you'll see that's correct. All right, so but we are going to change the color of the placeholder. So this is going to be a little different. So we're just going to use that pseudo selector right there. And we're only going to change the color. Everything else can stay the same. Let's grab that color. So let's scroll back up here. Got it. Okay, refresh the page. So now you see that that text right there is nice and light. And then once you get in here and you start typing, you can actually see all the text. So let's go ahead and copy over these styles just so they stay the same because it looks slightly different. That's fine. Okay. So the next thing I want to do is start working on the actual input, like outline and spacing and everything. So let's go ahead and see how much spacing we've got here. 11 on the left. Let's go. That's 10 to 11, 12, 13. So we've got 11 on the left, 13 on the top and bottom. And then for now, let's just set 11 on the right as well to keep this a little simple. So I'm going to do padding. We're going to start with the top. So 13 pixels, 11 pixels, 13 pixels, and then 11 pixels. And I think that'll be right. Let's see. Yes, I think that's correct. Looks like it. All right. So let's set the width to 100%. This way it's 100% of whatever it's sitting in. But we don't want it to sit that far. So we're going to say border, no, we're going to say box sizing, border box, and then that should, yep, now it's not running off the edge of the page. And then we're also going to set a max width. So let's come over here and set a max width of, let's see what we have on the XD document. 374 pixels. Okay, that's fine. Let's do 374 pixels. Now I actually do want to decrease this just a little bit because the actual width of most iPhones, most smaller iPhones, is 375 pixels. So I want to account for about 16 pixels of padding or margin, however you're building something on each side. So we're basically going to take 374 and subtract 32 from that. Sorry, I meant we're going to subtract 32 from 375, not 374. So it's going to be 343 pixels. Let's go back and refresh this. So that's looking pretty decent right there. Let's go ahead and grab our border radius. I have a feeling that's about 4 pixels here. Let's see. Yep, 4 pixels. And then now let's go ahead and grab that border color. So I'm going to say border 1 pixel solid, and it's going to be that color right there. So if we go back and refresh, that's looking good. That's looking really close to what we want, what we have in the design. However, when you click on this, you get that funky, blue. We do not want that, so we're gonna write outline none, and that should get rid of that. Yeah. So now when you click in it, it's not there. All right, so this is basically everything for this initial input style, and I don't want to set any margin or padding on this actual input to push the text that would be beneath it down. I would rather put the margin on that text. And I also don't want to set any fixed height on this input here, because if we were to change the font, I would rather that padding set the height of the input, because that's not quite as important. Whereas what is important to me is the spacing that comes off of that. So I don't want any funky sizing inside the input or spacing outside of the output. So I think that is fine. Another thing we can do is move down here to this hover style. So if we take a look at this, the only thing that's really changing here is this border. It's just changing ever so slightly. So let's go ahead and create that style. So I'm going to come over here and say input, well, the class of input wrapper. I'm actually going to set that hover on this, because I don't want it to change when you're hovering over just the label or just the input. So we're going to do both of these. So let's grab our border and change that just a little bit. Well, okay, so hold on. No. Let's take a quick look at that. No, okay, sorry. So that's not what we want. So we're going to grab our input when inside of there and change our border. That's what we want. Okay, sorry. So that's looking good. So those are two styles out of the way already. Let's go ahead and see what else we have in here. All right, so focused, that is the next one we have here. So this should be fairly simple as well. We will just use a little pseudo selector. So when we have our input wrapper, input focus, we're going to change this border to have, where's that at? This color. So it's just this blue color. Let's come over here and change this. All right, and then I'm gonna come back over here and refresh this. So when I hover over this, I don't know if you can see this over the compression on this video, but that color does change just ever so slightly. I think that looks fine to me. I like it. And then when you click in here, you should be able to see that that blue does update. So one of the other things that we do want to do is change the color of that caret. So let's go ahead and let's go to just our regular input style, and we're gonna write caret color and it's just going to be that same blue. So now when you're over here and you click in here, it is that nice blue. So let's go ahead and see what else we have to style. So we've taken care of these first three. Let's take a look about the focused hover. Okay, so this I'm okay with this being when you're only hovering over the actual input. So let's see if this works. So we're gonna do a background of, what is this? It's gonna be, let's do RGBA. So that should be easy, and then that's just gonna be 5%. So it's gonna be 0, 111, and 246. So let's do RGBA 0, 111, and 246, and that's both going to be at 0.05 on the alpha channel. Let's go ahead and refresh this page. So when we hover, we still get that effect. Now when you're in the input and you're hovering over it, you get that nice blue, but when you're out of it, that blue goes away. So that looks good to me. Let's see what else we've got. When you're typing, it's that nice dark color, which I believe we've already taken care of. So let's just double check this. You're in here and you're typing. This is my test text. All right, that looks good. The style remains. When you're in here, everything's nice and legible. So that's perfect. I like that a lot. Let's go ahead and see what else we have for inputs. So we have basically the error states. So these are two different error states. This is an error with the text. Well, sorry, without text in the input, and this is error with text in the input. So just two slightly different things. Then we have a required field, which nothing even changes on this other than we just have a little asterisk there. And then we have some disabled inputs, and then the input with text, which we already pretty much have this styled. So let's go ahead and go back over to the HTML, and I'm just going to grab this whole input here, and let's just create a couple of them. So we're going to do input wrapper error, and then we're going to do disabled. Okay. So on this input wrapper with an error, we're actually going to do a small tag here and just say this is the error description. Just like that. And this is fine as is. Let's go ahead and refresh this page. Now you can see we have 3 of these inputs. That's great. Let's see, what do we want to do? On the bottom of the input wrapper here, I do want some margin. So I'm going to say 0, 0, and then let's do 16 pixels and then 0. That way it pushes everything down at a nice spacing. I like that. Okay. Let's jump over to the XD document again, and we'll move on down here. So we've taken care of everything up into this error. So let's go grab the input with an error. But before we do that, let's style this small piece of text. And you can see it sits 2 pixels below, and it's at 11 font size. So let's do input wrapper small. So if there is a small tag, we're going to do font size. Let's just grab this and duplicate that down. We're not going to do any transform on it. The font weight will be 400. The color's fine. I don't want any padding, but we are going to change the margin a little bit. So it's going to be 2 pixels on the top, 0, 0, and then 0. So now if we come back over here and look at this, you'll see that the descriptor text down beneath there looks exactly like it should, except I have totally misspelled those words. Let's go ahead and fix that. This is the description. If that's still wrong, I am severely blind right now. All right, so that looks fine. Let's go ahead and now select the input wrapper with an error on it. So input wrapper with an error, class of an error. All right, so there's a few things that is going to change here. And we don't want to do this actually. We want only when they're together. And then the things we are going to style is the input and then the actual text down here. So let's start with the input. So the background is going to be 255, 46, 46 at 10% on the alpha. So I'm going to say background RGBA, 255, 46, 46, and then 0.1. All right, that should be good. Let's go ahead and see if that worked. That did not work because we want to focus on the input. So let's change that. And there we go. That's updated. Now the border has also changed. So let's grab what that border is. So that border is going to be RGBA 2554646 at 40% on the alpha. So let's go ahead and I'm just going to grab this RGBA and we're going to say border 1 pixel solid RGBA, and then we're just going to change this to 4, and that's going to make it 40% on the alpha channel. So now you'll see that is the input text, but we do also need to style the placeholder text. So again, we're going to use that pseudo selector for placeholder, and we don't need these anymore, but we do want to see what that value is. So I think it's this, yep, it's exactly the same. So I'm just going to copy this RGBA value, and we're going to change the color here. Now if we come back over here, perfect. That is looking exactly like that should, except we don't want this to turn blue when there's an error. That just doesn't look good. So let's see here. Let's do here input hover. Let's just let the backgrounds, well, let's just leave both of these. There we go. That fixed that whole problem right there. And then when there's an error, let's change the caret color to that same red, just because we don't want those clashing. So error input caret color. Let's just do this RGBA value. Perfect. All right, that's good with me. Let's go ahead and see what else we've got on that. Just this small, and the only thing that's changing here is the color. It's just that 2554646 at full opacity. So error input, let's bring this down. Let's go down here. So we don't want the input, we just want the small when there's an error. And the only thing we're going to do is change this so that when there's an error, it will be red. And when there's not an error, it'll be the nice color that we had. So you can see this all is working great now. This is great. That's fine. So let's do something real quick with the HTML. I'm just going to copy and paste this, and we're going to remove the error class just like that. So now you can see these are the same inputs. The only difference is one has an error class and one doesn't. Great. All right. So back over to the XD document, you will see that when there is an error, the only other change is when you're typing. So when you start typing your text, it's going to display that at full opacity. So let's go ahead and find our HTML. And let's look. So we have input, error, input. So we're also going to change the color here. And that is going to be this same color. We can just grab this whole line of code just like that. And keep in mind, we're coloring the placeholder text differently. So we'll save and refresh. Nothing has changed until you start typing. And now it is working correctly. So that's looking good. I'm happy with that. Let's go ahead and style a few last things. So we have the input, if it's required. Again, nothing's really changing there. So I'm not going to worry about that right now because we're just going to make a required input look a little different by adding that asterisk. So that doesn't really have to do with code. Let's go ahead, however, and work on our disabled inputs. So we're actually going to need two disabled inputs because one's going to need to have placeholder and one's actually going to need to have text in it. So let's go ahead and duplicate our disabled input. And all I'm going to do is change this placeholder text to, well, yeah, I'll change this to value. And then we'll say this is some text. So now if we refresh the page, you'll see this actually has nothing in it, whereas this does. So let's go ahead and start styling our disabled inputs. So to start this, I am going to go ahead and grab the same class and whole selection that we had done here for the first error. I think that's the one that we had with the error, the first one. Yeah. All right. And then we're going to change this from error to disabled. Disabled. Yeah, that looks about right. So let's see what we're actually changing. So this, I believe, is staying exactly the same. I don't think that's changing at all. Let's just double check. Nope, no change whatsoever. So the things that are changing is this label, which I think that's the same hex code just displayed at 70% opacity. Yes, that's correct. So let's go ahead and do that one first. So I'm just going to say opacity 0.7. And we're going to change this from input to label. Great. So now that's at a different opacity. And then the next thing we're going to do is set the background of the input as well as the border. So let's go ahead and look at that. That's going to be this hex code displayed at 25%. So we'll see. Duplicate that down, and then let's change this from label to input. And then what can we do here? We're going to change the background to, let's grab the actual RGB value, and then we'll just turn this into RGBA. That way it doesn't affect our text color by applying opacity. So it's 209 all the way, and then at 25%. And then the 25%, just like that. All right, and then we'll do border. I'll do 1 pixel solid. And then we'll do the same RGBA value right there. Now let's go ahead and refresh. All right, so that's looking pretty close, but the border is looking a little off. I'm not quite sure why. Let's just go ahead and display the border as none. There, that works great. All right, so another thing that we want to help fix real quick is this. So we don't want to be able to select or click into an input that's been disabled. So we're going to come over here and on our inputs, so we'll go here and here, we're just going to write disabled. And then now, if we come back over here and refresh, nothing's visually changed, but you cannot click into these any longer. And let's look at the XD document. As you can see, the styling between these two are exactly the same, other than the fact that this already had text in it. So we can adjust this just a little bit because the color of this is slightly different. It's just a little less opaque. It's not very obvious, but it's just a little less. Let's see. So it's going to be 5.4, so it's the same thing. But we can do this with 8.4, 8.4, 8.4, and then we'll set the color to RGBA. So let's grab our disabled. Where is it? Error, disabled. Okay. So that was changing the label. So let's go ahead and change the color to RGBA. And what did I say that was? 8.4. 8.4 at 80%, so 0.8. And then that should work. Yep, just a little less opaque. And one other thing that I do want to keep in mind is that there may be an input with some other helper text beneath it. So let's duplicate this last one. And we'll grab this small and place it under here as well. So we don't want that to be quite as visible because it's disabled. So we'll come over to our HTML here. And just like we're doing this, we're also going to apply this to the small. Just like that. So now the small is a little less opaque as well. So this really covers all of those different input states that we could possibly have. We're not changing anything on this hover. We don't really need to. That's fine. I think that's great. We have disabled inputs here. I don't see the problem here. And again, if you're typing, that's all set. So I think that is fine. Let's see what else we could do. I don't even think we need anything else right now. We've covered this one, hovering, focused, and hovered, typing, the error messages, or just the error styling, I should say, how it looks with an error if there's text in the input, and then again, required is going to be something very simple, but what we can do is, let me see, we should be able to go ahead and set, let's grab this input and duplicate it, and I'll just say required on here, and let's see if anything changes. So this would be the required one, and nothing has changed. See, I don't really want to style anything specific there, so I would also want to set a input of, well, actually nothing. I would rather keep this set as required, and then inside here we can just display an asterisk like that, and that's perfectly fine. It's just a visual thing. And if this were part of a form and we were doing some form validation, then I would say go ahead and display an error message if they didn't fill this out, because we are visually showing that it's required with the asterisk. I think that will be perfectly sufficient. But anyways, the nice thing about the way that we just styled all of this is if the font were to change, the way that this is all done, it should, well, styled using flex and just margins and paddings and not having very specific heights. If the font were to change to a different font, this should all space out correctly and still have good spacing. So let's go ahead and just quickly test that out and see. So I'm just going to go ahead and remove this and change it to something else. Let's just do something crazy like a serif. See what happens. Okay, so sorry, we added that there. So let's go ahead and change this to serif. All right, refresh. All right, so now you can see, even though we changed the whole font, none of the spacing really looks off. The font is a little more compact, but that's just the type of font that it is. But all the spacing around it is still perfectly equal, and there's no weird heights or anything that we have to worry about. So anyways, that was something that I've been wanting to do, just style all of this stuff up. And let's go ahead and maybe pull this up on like a iPhone or something, and you can see. All right, so let's really quick go ahead and add in this meta tag so we can actually view this properly. And refresh that, and you can see this is what the inputs will look like. Let's see if we can go to a device even smaller, or just go responsive. Great. So you can see how that works right there. This is extremely small. I can't imagine anyone would ever be looking on the device that's 150 pixels wide, but you can use this to just see how it is a little responsive right here without distorting anything or anything getting messed up. So that's fine. If you're going to use a icon inside of these inputs, which we're not going to cover in this video, maybe we'll add some additional styling for icons in a future video. I would suggest, putting this over here on the right corner and then increasing the input padding on the right side, so that, say you're in here and you're typing, you don't want it to run all the way up to the edge. So maybe double the input so that the text is cut off before you actually reach that icon. That way they're just not running into each other. And I think that would be perfectly fine. So anyways, guys, that's it for styling these inputs. That is a part of this little design system we're kind of working on every now and then. Alright guys, so that's going to be it for this video. I know it ran quite long. I am actually pretty tired right now. But I'm glad we got to sit down and work on this. I really hope you learned something and you were able to pick something up, maybe styling like the placeholder text or the caret color. Those were some things that I didn't really know until I had got into, developing and doing front end stuff. I didn't even know how to do that. I had to research that. So hopefully you learned a little something here. If you did, leave a comment down below and let me know what that was. If you have any questions about anything we did in this video, or if I didn't answer anything, leave them down below as well, and I'll do my best to respond to those. But next week, I'm hoping I can spend more time and get started with some of the video requests that I've actually had come in over the past few weeks. I'm very excited to get to those. So anyways, I hope you guys have a great day, and I will see you in the next one.